So this is a little session on using vCD as a virtual infrastructure manager. So what we're basically going through is we're not doing anything new as far as OSM goes. We're not going to, add new contents to any descriptor or do anything like that. This is more so specifically about how OSM can control multiple different virtual infrastructure managers without you needing to do anything to your descriptors just to make it work. So vCD is something quite different from OpenStack, but yet OSM can manage it the exact same way. So as far as any onboarding process goes, the procedure is going to be exactly the same. You define your day 0, your day 1, your day 2 actions, your primitives, everything that's needed, your images, BDU characteristics, network requirements, and the one that you use for OpenStack is also valid for VMware's vCloud Director. Sorry, I should have explained. vCD stands for vCloud Director. So what is different? The cloud image format is different. So OpenStack with KVM uses the QCOW2 format for all of its images. That's a specific virtual disk format, which is a copy on write concept, and VMware, being based on its ESXi hypervisor, uses a different format called VMDK. So one of the things that is going to need to happen is if you're using images that were originally for OpenStack, they would need to be converted to this VMDK format. vCloud Director also doesn't have the equivalent of a glance client. So as part of the DevOps repo, we actually provide a couple helpers, one being an OVF converter that converts files from the QCOW2 to the VMDK format, and the OVF uploader, which is used like you would use glance to, or OpenStack image upload, to be able to upload images into vCloud Director. So once again, welcome to vCloud Director. It's not OpenStack. There are no OpenStack APIs, so you can't use things like OpenStack server list or OpenStack image list or any of that. There are open source libraries for interacting with it. There's the vCloud Python library, and there's a command line that can be used for manipulation called the vCD CLI. And like the OpenStack CLI, it's, you can create users and tenants. You can upload images with it. You can start new virtual machines. So the vCD CLI is the equivalent of the OpenStack CLI. There's similar concepts as far as tenants and organizations go. But there's also inside of vCD what they sort of call data centers. And those would be what you would use to represent regions and availability zones. So for example, if I've got a central site where I've got a bunch of VMs that are doing common infrastructure and I have another edge site, I would create a separate data center for that edge site. So that way I can dictate where placement of VMs go. So there is what's called a tenant portal in vCloud Director. So there's two web UIs for it. One is for the administration, where you create the different tenants and are able to manage the whole infrastructure, including what hypervisors go where. And then there's a separate login for individual tenants. And that would be the sort of thing that you would be using and looking at there. So in there, you've got your data centers, which I explained before. Then you've got catalogs and VApp templates. In OpenStack, you just basically have a glance repository of images, and there's one and only one of them. In vCloud Director, they have a concept of catalogs of images. So it's a way of grouping things and being able to share things between tenants a little bit more easily and with finer-grained access controls. So that's the reason why there's kind of one extra layer of indirection here. And lastly, we've got the vApps, virtual apps. And that you can almost think of it as similar to the OSM network service concept, where network service defines a bunch of virtual delivery units that all work together. A vApp can also provide that same thing. So that's it's you know a series of VMs and networks that can be managed as a whole. So this is what it looks like when you log in to the web UI as a user. And actually, maybe what I should do is, where do we have the Hackfest? In here, for anyone who wants to look at it, in the Etherpad, I've got the vim create command and some descriptors here. So if you actually go to, here it is, this auth URL, you can log in. I've only created OSM Hackfest 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if anybody's logging in, you know, pick one of those and you can take a look at what you're seeing inside of there. Okay. So this is what the Tenant Portal looks like. It shows you that we've got one data center called Etsy, got a little bit of information about the number of apps running and what's going on there. The next thing is the catalogs. And this here is where we've converted some basic Ubuntu cloud images and uploaded them to vCD so that we can instantiate VNFs from them. The vApp template almost looks identical to the catalog list because we're basically maintaining a one-to-one relationship between the name of the catalog and the image inside of it that's going to be uploaded, or sorry, that's going to be used to create the VM. And then, so conversion of images, the code is available. It's part of the DevOps repository. So you would actually install that, and then we can do a conversion and upload images. So there are two file extensions for cloud images, IMG and QCOW2. And it turns out that the cloud images for Ubuntu end with .img. So I'm getting myself all sorts of confused here. So this is the OVF converter that converts it from QCOW to VMDK. And you should be able to use any basic cloud image that you have. The VNF Onboarding has the HSS and SP gateway images for NextDPC. We could just go ahead and convert those ones, and then we can upload them as well. And for some reason, this is a little bit slower than I had hoped it would be, but this is what it looks like to convert. The other thing that the conversion does is, inside of VMware, there's also a metadata that can go along with an image called an OVF, or which is, sorry, there we go. So there's the OVF file, and this is XML that describes a little bit about the disk that was created. So under OpenStack, you've got flavors, basically, and the flavors are specified on the server side, or on the OpenStack side, and then when you're given a VNF, typically you're just given the disk image, and then you're told, oh, create a flavor with the following characteristics. VMware's approach since long ago was that the flavor and metadata about the image goes with the image. So that's what the OVF is. It's not just flavor, but additional things like if you've got multiple disks that go together, that would be specified inside of the OVF. All of this to say that the converter automatically generates the OVF for you, so we don't have to worry about that. It'll be taken care of automatically. So once that has been converted, we can go through and then show an upload. Okay, well, the upload itself is not all that exciting. And the other thing is that I have already uploaded this, so I don't need to waste everybody's time by debugging this. And anyone who wants to try it, you will see that the catalog is already present. So just go back to the slide deck for a moment here. So the next thing I'm going to do is just simply use the regular OSM create command to create the network service. And paste here. Okay, so that has loaded or started the process inside of OSM. We go over to the OSM UI. Everything looks the same as far as OSM is concerned. So now this is actually going over to vCloud Director, and it is making sure that the networks are there, the image can be created, the virtual app can be created. So if I go back over now to the vCloud Director web UI, I can see here it says updating virtual machine succeeded. It's going in and running things. And going in under the data center list itself, we'll now be able to see that there is a new VM that is in the process of being started up. So there's our Ubuntu 1804 VM that's being started. And one other thing that I can show you sort of under the hood is there is from VMware this vSphere client, which is a central manager underneath the hood for all of the hypervisors. And we can see in here that right here, it is creating this virtual machine on the hypervisor directly. Still going. Oh, one other thing that is fundamentally different between vCloud Director and OpenStack is the concept of the user data and the user data metadata service. So when you create a VM under OpenStack, that VM does a special callback to that 169 something or other IP address, which the metadata service listens on. And you can get a bunch of information into your VM, like your SSH keys, IP address configuration. All of your cloud init comes from the metadata service. But there is no metadata service in vCloud Director. So what OSM does under the hood instead is it creates a config drive with all of the metadata in it, and then attaches that to the VM as virtual media, a CD basically. So that way, when the image boots up, the Cloud Init service goes and it knows to look to see if there's a config drive mounted, and it gets the information from there instead. So that's another reason, or another way that OSM has abstracted, the details of the underlying virtual infrastructure manager. And it behaves the same through OSM, even though fundamentally the Vim is different under the hood. So here's our virtual machine now in a powered on state. And if we go over here to, so the OSM VNF list, OSM VNF list. You can see there's the VM, VNF show. And here we can see, it's all up and running, and here's our IP address. So we can SSH to that. And the reason why the SSH works right off, because the SSH key was put into the config drive, because that's what we specified when we did the NS create. We actually specified the SSH key to use. So in my case, it's right here in authorized keys. So there is showing how the cloud init works, showing how the Vim itself instantiates things, and basically that's it. So I didn't want to take a huge whole amount of time because it is Friday on this, but does anybody have any questions or want to see anything more? Then that's it. All right, thank you, everybody.